My name is Esben Kristoffersen. I'm an architect on the developer tools and the compiler in Microsoft. And with me today, I have brought Michael Nielsen from ForNav. And we're going to talk about Universal Code. How many of you have heard about Universal Code? By hands? Oh, great deal. Good.
Fantastic.
It's a good starting point. So it's a technical presentation, but I got a few slides from Kurt, who's sitting somewhere here. So if it comes to finer details on the program itself, it's Kurt, not us. So, but the idea around the program is to help us, Microsoft, and help you. It may not feel that way all the time, but that's the whole idea. So we want new customers to Business Central to be able to find the apps they need in AppSource. And we also want existing customers to see a path forward from where they are on-premise, a path into the cloud where we want everyone to be. And being cloud first, that's also a way of limit the time that you spend and we spend on upgrading customers, giving more time in the channel for you to focus on adding value, adding good solutions for everyone. And the isolation between our code and your code that happens when you are creating cloud-ready solutions also allows us to innovate more in the base. Rather than you relying on everything in the base, now you're relying only on the service that we provide on the base application and the rest of our apps. And this is probably more something you should talk with Kurt about. It replaces a number of legacy programs. And what is Universal Code? Essentially, it is cloud-optimized extensions. Extensions with the target set to cloud, meaning that there's a lot of capability in the A language and in the platform that you won't be allowed to use. But the benefit of this is that they can be implemented everywhere. I mean, both on-prem and in the cloud. They are not tied to a single place. So, what is the Universal Code initiative? It's us starting to enforce Universal Code in the platform, both for on-premise and also in the cloud, where it has always been like that. You need to have target equals cloud, and you cannot modify the base application. We are now starting to enforce the same on-premise going forward. And you will be able to license the right to use base app application and modify modify the base application and use on-prem target. This was the license part and the more marketing part of the slides, and now we're going into the more technical details. But first, a short disclaimer. There's no one easy fix, and we know it. It's hard. Many years of on-prem coding have tied you to a lot of things on-premise. And you will probably encounter many different obstacles in on-prem solutions that makes it hard to move them. And this will only be some possible solutions to some problems that we'll present here. So, how are we getting there? So, in order to get ready, start by checking the target setting in app.json. If it's true, fine, all done, you can leave, have lunch, whatever you want, or you can stick around and hear some ideas to what you can do, or maybe improve what you already have done. So, I needed a demo app for this, something I could modify and change into this. So I chose a beer organizer, if I happen to have a number of beer pictures lying around for some reason. So, and this marvelous app is able to keep a collection of pictures of beers, and you can rate them. So, very useful. There's a number of features. First of all, it's an extension. It has a gallery of beers. And if any of you now have a headache due to last night, feel free to close your eyes and just, listen. You can actually import beers, pictures of beers into this with a feature called Brew First Batch, and you can rate them with stars, which will put a number of stars on the picture. So, like this. So, one of the first problems is that the on-prem version I first created was actually accessing local files to read in pictures. In general, there's a number of local resources which you can now not access when you do universal code. It's files, it's networks, it's local hardware. Many solutions in the real world, they are actually talking to local hardware. It can be a scale that you weigh something on, it can be a printer, it can be a machine, real world objects. But if you're in the cloud, you need to do something else. So in this case, this app has a feature called Brew First Batch. It's a little bit like when you first start on a social media, like LinkedIn. You want everyone to think you have a great big network and have some experience. It's the same here. You don't want an empty list of beers. It looks like you don't know what it is. So it has a feature. You can pull in a number of pictures and have a populated list. In the on-prem version, it looked like this. Basically using a get server directory files list from file management code unit in the system application, which reach files from your local drive on the server. Clearly something we will not allow, or we are not allowing in the cloud. And if you flip the target to cloud, you get a bunch of errors, all saying that this is not supported in the cloud. So I had to come up with something else. And I think a natural choice here was actually to use Azure Blob Storage. So I created a small repository in Azure Blob Storage, uploaded a bunch of pictures, and then I used the recent module in system application to access Azure Blob Storage and read in the files and write them into my image list table. And actually, the code became cleaner, more simple, and it's actually usable for both on-prem and SaaS, and feels like a good solution. That was my solution, in this case, to get around local files. There are other ways of doing it. This is one. Last time I was here in this conference 3 years ago, I did a demo with a robot, Lego robot, which were attached to a local computer. It's a 10-year-old Lego robot, which over USB could be communicating with a computer. And I showed how that could be done through the cloud. What I did was, actually, using one laptop over here, oops, me sitting there, bad picture, there's hair and everything, maybe it's even a helmet, so I picked another one. So I was using one computer with a web client talking to an Azure cloud service. And in that cloud service, I used Azure Service Bus Relay to talk to another computer with a local agent running. That way I could actually work with a local resource through the cloud. The problem is essentially this. You have a web browser, and web browsers are shielded from accessing local resources. That's the whole purpose, and if it breaks down, people tend to go in panic. So I was using the web browser with our lovely Business Central client, working with a backend service, and I wanted to access some on-premise hardware. In this case, I was in the same room, but I didn't have to be. By using Azure Service Bus Relay, this is possible. And the way it works is that the on-prem service runs a local agent that adds or creates a listener to an endpoint in Azure Service Bus Relay. And then the cloud service, in this case, Business Central, with some AL code, can talk to the Service Bus Relay and call into on-premise, even though it's behind a firewall. The flow in this example I used, the demo for this is available on the BC Tech repo. There's a link to it later. So essentially from, oops, can I use this? From over here, I had supports a number of different extensions that can handle different areas of functionality locally. Going through Business Central and calling through using the HTTP client into Service Bus Relay with a command or something, down to a local agent running as a service or any piece of code running locally that had a plugin model. And that plugin model could access local files, could write to a printer, could whatever you do, it's C# code. And send replies all the way back through Service Bus Relay into Business Central and back to my AL code. That way I could browse the local file system. That's actually a part of the code lying around there. This is a solution for in those cases where you want something in the cloud to talk to local hardware. There are many cases out there where this makes a lot of sense. So a number of different solutions here. The last one, which I call dual service pattern, I will get back to in a second. On-prem APIs. The on-prem APIs, which are all the ones in the base app. There's no way around those. You will have to find another solution for those. Some of them will be covered by the ones representing files or other local resources, but there may be other things we, for security reasons, have locked down on-premise. And there's probably not a single answer to those, so you will need to refactor your way around it. Then there's the good old .NET Interop feature. Many years ago in AL, we gave you a very, very sharp tool, and you have used it a lot all over the place, and we know that. Unfortunately, there's no way that we can support .NET running in our SaaS solution, so you have to move it somewhere else. In my sample program here, I am using a .NET library to manipulate the pictures. I mean, potentially it could be done in AL, but it will probably be very hard and take a very long time. So not something I would like to do. And the problem is essentially this. I have an extension. Target is on-prem, should be cloud. That had some cloud incompatible .NET, shouldn't be there at all. And the Business Central installation, that should be anywhere. So how can we get to that? First of all, we need to extract the .NET somewhere else outside, and that would allow us to make the extension target equals cloud, and also now we can install it anywhere. So now we have an external service here with some incompatible .NET. Ideally, or the dual service pattern here actually is a way of having it in both worlds. Two different ways. In the cloud, in this case, I'm using an Azure function, and on-prem, I'll use a local service. They are both having a reference to the same small library that allows me to manipulate an image. In my AL code, I do this. I have an interface describing the things I want to do with this service. In this case, there's only an add rating method, but there could be plenty of methods in this describing my service interaction. Then I have a single instance code unit, which is the one I use whenever I want to interact with my service. And on the first, I have this instance procedure, and I use the ability to return a complex type, in this case the interface, to an implementation. And the first time I call it, I initialize it. And in this case, I do it depending on whether I'm SaaS or on-premise. Then I have two different implementations. One for on-prem and one for SaaS. And in this case, their calling conventions with their local service are slightly different, so they are actually not exactly the same, but they're close. They are both talking to a web service endpoint, the Azure function for one, and the local service as the other one. This means that the consumption code becomes very clean. In this case, it's here. Let's see, service.instance, add rating, add get image as base 64. And completely hidden from all the consuming code. Another benefit of this is that this pattern also makes it very easy to mock out the service when you're creating tests, which you of course should. So you can create a mock service that have a simple mock implementation of what the service call is doing. So let's try to run it. Any preferences for cloud or on-prem? Personally, I prefer cloud, but should we do that? So this is a cloud sandbox with the upgraded solution in. Sorry. Go. Have the solution here, and it shows up as it should be a gallery. And notice the new action bar that have unfolded my rating actions, and I have the brew first batch, which is talking to, in this case, an Azure function, to Azure Blob Storage, loading in images and populating the list here. And if I change this, we can even get the beers, and I can now vote for one of my favorite ones. Get rid of this one. There. Like this, using an Azure function. And if I ran it on-premise, I would get the same functionality. It's probably spinning up my Azure function somewhere now. And I got some stars there. And with this pattern, you can extract the .NET somewhere else and still have a cloud-ready solution. So, if this doesn't get you all the way, we have a number of ISV development centers that can also help you going further, or maybe you can get some inspiration from Michael, who will explain what they did. And there is a list of further reading. So, over to you, Michael.
Thank you. Okay. So when DLL Antwerp was introduced in 2013, is that correct when we did that, Esben? So
it sounds right.
It was extremely popular because remember back in the old Seaside library, a string copy was the sort of the most complex function you had in there. And .NET really gave you the capability of getting out to do a lot more. So you could call graphics libraries out there. You could also do integration. So it was sort of the way out of there. But a lot of things have happened since 2013, and also the .NET world started to have some cracks, and that's also being replaced by .NET Core now. So a lot of things have happened. Universal Code is just one thing that's pushing you away from .NET, which is sort of from the old on-prem world into what we're doing on cloud these days. So I'm going to talk about the challenges we had with using DLL in the past with FNAF, but also back in the Microsoft days, and also where we are going and the road to that. So what I don't think you mentioned, but actually Business Central is moving to the .NET Core because that's more efficient to run on servers.
Yes.
So BC is moving away from .NET Framework because you cannot run them side by side. So no matter if you want to go Universal Code or not, you'll be pushed to move away from .NET Framework. And it's going to be soon. And my slides, which was from the Swing, it said long term, but I removed that. It's now.
Yes, that was what Vincent also told you yesterday.
Also, even though you might be able to upgrade your .NET Framework libraries to the .NET Core, maybe the developer retired, and that's probably likely, or the vendor went out of business, or for some other reason you cannot get there. And also there's a huge class of .NET Framework libraries which cannot be ported. So .NET was based on Win32 and .NET graphics in there. And that doesn't mix with .NET Core at all. So you cannot move those libraries. So if you're doing anything with PDFs or other of that kind of stuff, you're toast in this world. You cannot use that anymore. You need to move to something else. And also Universal Code, which is modeled by Kurt down here. So that has both a stick and a carrot. So the carrot is that customers who are sort of reading news, they can tell that, okay, they want to move long-term to the cloud. So that's the carrot. The stick is if they don't read the news, Kurt will send them an invoice to pay for DLL support. So they will know sooner or later the hard way or the good way. So customer will know this and put you guys in this room under a lot of pressure to move away from this. Also, working with DLLs outside Microsoft, I found out that it's not just plug and play and Xcopy. You have version conflicts all over the place. So if we ever had a DLL with a reference to OpenXML, then Esben in some new version would change to a new DLL and your solution would blow up depending on if he was the fastest to load his version of OpenXML or it was us. So you end up having angry customers saying it doesn't work because it cannot load OpenXML, and that's because of the conflict. So if you do a DLL today, you have to do force loading of types in your system and do all sort of hoops to get this to work. So it's not just Xcopy and it'll work. That was the story 20 years ago, but not anymore. And also, once you install a new version of your DLL, you need to restart the service tier. And no customer wants to have a restart of a service tier, so you have to wait until late at night and restart it, and that's never a good thing. And nobody wants to restart, so that's a reason alone to stay with it. So, of course, we as an ISV and also everybody else to move to a way or or stay on BC 14. A lot of people are doing that, but I won't recommend that because that's sort of your solution is dead in the water if you do that. So. Okay, so when Esben told me you just create a Windows service, I was scared shitless because I looked at back in the late 90s to create a Windows service. You took a C++ compiler and then you wrote stuff that nobody could understand it, and it would never work. It would break down. So I said, no. But actually, it's quite easy today. So .NET has made it extremely easy to create a service, and you're guided through this. So the journey there was not that long. Actually, the biggest effort of doing this is to create an installer that actually installs the service, but that's another story. I'm not going to cover this today. So let me run you through the steps. So in Visual Studio, you simply go in, there's a project type called Windows Service, so that's easy enough. So you start there, and then you basically add your own .NET DLL code to the solution. So for now, we already had an asset function that we use for the cloud version of for now. That was fairly easy, so we just added it. And also, as Esben talked about, the interface in our case is basically we send over the wire that we need a data set with the data that people need in a report. Then we have the layout, and then we have what output you want, if you want to have Excel or PDF on, and then we have the license information so we can charge people for our product. So that's basically it, and back we get a PDF or Excel or whatever. So that's fairly easy and very suitable for this kind of solution. I'll get back to other scenarios where it's not obvious and you have to do something else. But it's pretty forward what you need to do. Then you add some plumbing code to stitch the service code that you get from the template with your DLL code. And that's basically it. So let me just bring up our solution, which is actually what we have shipping today. And I can show you the code. So what VS will create for you is a service-based class that you inherit from. And that has on start and on stop down here. And basically, if you ever played around with a Windows service, you know that, and you restart the BC server all the time, you know that you can start or restart or stop it. So these are basically the methods being called in here that does that. What you also need to do, or I definitely recommend you to do, is also to add calls to the event log, so you actually write down what you're doing. So if the service doesn't work, there's no UI, remember, you can actually go to the event log, or somebody can go and say it stopped because of some weird error in here. But that's basically it. Next thing you do is to basically call the constructor on the listener code, and also what Esben talked about. And basically there's a fantastic HTTP listener in .NET you can use. So you basically go in and spin up the number of connections you want to use. So we use 100 in here, which is far enough for our purpose. And then you basically start listening. So now this is listening to HTTP calls that comes in. And now when something comes in, basically calls this process request async. And then you can basically read out the data that was sent over the wire and do with it what you want to do, and then send the payload back. And it's pretty easy to do this if you already have the pieces together in here. So we check the license information and then render the report, and then we send stuff back. And basically we have, again, the same interface inside the L code on our cloud version, also on this universal code solution we have. So there's no difference. So the AL part of the solution that we have an app source, and also an on-prem thing until Esben gives up and puts on-prem on app source as well. Sorry, Esben, I couldn't stand that. So the code is the same. It's just the delivery mechanism is different in here. So extremely easy to do. So this is sort of the listener side in here, and if I have just one more slide in here, I can show you the service, and that's basically just a HTTP call. So you basically can call your local service in here. So we have cheated a little because if you want to use HTTPS, becomes a little more challenging because running a listener under HBS is, I'm not clever enough to figure it out, so I stopped with this. But you can also do this, of course, but we took it to use HBS, so it has to run on the same machine as the BC server. But for our purpose, that's probably okay. So you basically call an HB call to this listener, and it executes your call and comes back with the results. So that's basically just the replacement of the DLL. So just to recap on the pros and cons of this. So you get Kurt happy, and he doesn't send you an invoice, so it's compliant with your code. It doesn't require the restart of the EST all the time. You don't get the type conflicts that you inevitably end up having if you use OpenXML or anything that conflicts with BC or any other libraries in there. You don't need to rewrite all your code to go to .NET Core. You can stay in .NET Framework. You can also go to Core, of course, but the code you have already will work in this solution. And also, really great reason for not doing this, and also what Esben talked about the cloud. You cannot kill the service. If you have a DLL running in prog with your service tier, it's a dangerous thing because it can bring down everything to stop, and you have no clue what went on, and the customer's down, and you have no idea what caused this. So the drawback, of course, there's also drawbacks, is that it works best if it's stateless, because that's sort of the whole idea of having these things. So keeping state requires some work on the server side. You need to have a window installer, which is probably the biggest task of this. And also, if you have a lot of calls with very little data in it, marshalling can be really expensive because it has to go over the wire all the time. But actually, in the case of the FNAP DLL, we see that our reports render faster with this solution than before. I have no idea why, but it's around double the speed for running in this solution, even though it goes over the wire on the same machine compared to running in prop. So go home, do this, and do it now before it's too late. Thanks, Esben.
Thank you, Michael. So I think we are ready for questions.
Yep.
If there are any. Any questions?
We scared people away. Sorry.
Yeah, or they are just eager to get home and fix it quickly. Oh,
there's one.
There's one. Oh, that's the light. Sorry.
Thank you. With the universal code, we have to implement our code with the on-cloud target. But the control on the check with the license with our client customer license, in which way is made? Because I know that if a license was migrated before April, if I don't get wrong, there will be no additional cost to run on-prem code. But after May, you have to use the on-target target, the on-cloud target. And but the check with the license, in which way is made? Because if I had a version 19 or a 20, I don't know if the check with the universal code is valid.
Oh, defer this to Kurt.
Hey, so the check that we're going to do is in the platform. So the moment that you're going to download the latest version, the upcoming versions and all the supported versions, you will see that the platform will check whether you have loaded no extensions, so code customizations, or whether you have loaded non-universal code, so cloud not targeting cloud. And at that moment in time, an error will be thrown, and that error will basically tell you that you will have to license these non-universal code modules. So that's how we're going to... All supported versions in the on-prem version. Okay.
I think we are competing with lunch, Esben. So any more
maybe.
questions?
So, but we have more T-shirts if...
I'm not sure whether you're covered it or not, but why do you use a Windows service and not a web service for the replacement of the DLL? A local web service.
It's an HTTP listener. It's a small web service. And we didn't want to use IIS because that gives a whole array of other problems. Because it has this big pudding around it, we tend to see. So HTTP listener is really low footprint and very efficient solution. And also in a lot of installations, the admins doesn't want to allow IIS. But this always works, and it's part of Windows. So.
Okay, thank you.
More questions? Yeah. Oops. First.
One small question maybe. What's Microsoft effort in having like the base app also cloud ready, let's say, universal code ready? Because once happened that we copy pasted code from the base app, from the Belgium version, and when we put the target to cloud, did not compile. So maybe in general, what's their effort to provide the same as we do?
Yeah. That's a good question. First of all, we are also trying to clean up our base app, our app, but we also have parts of it where we, same way as we own the platform, can do stuff which that we couldn't allow you to do, because we, after all, trust ourselves more. Not that we don't trust you, but that's that's the reason why it is like that. But we are also trying to separate, but it will be a longer process. Also because whenever we make bigger changes to the base app, you tend not to like us because then you have to change your code around it. So it's a long process, but we are also trying to be clean. More up there.
Thanks. So since BC 19, we had the possibility to integrate with the Azure Blob Storage. Mm-hmm. It's part of the base app or system app now.
Yeah.
But one of the things that was not introduced was basically some kind of setup table for configuring the connections to the blob storage. Have any changes been made in BC 21 or the upcoming release in regards to having, you know, a generic setup place where you can configure the different accounts?
I don't think so, but I think the reason is also if at least without any knowing about this, but my guess would be that if multiple extensions are using Azure Blob Storage, they may not want to target the same Azure Blob Storage. It can be one extension actually access some account and another uses another. It doesn't have to be the same.
No. I was interested in a kind of a list where you could configure your different connection endpoints so that I can say that when I want to do some custom file integration, use this account. And instead of having each partner, each app, building a custom configuration for handling that, it would be nice that it was part of the base app. Yeah.
So it may be there, it may not. I don't know.
Fair enough.
Better at compiler questions. Okay. More questions?
Yeah.
So the Windows service that was shown, while it was said it was universal code compliant, as I understand it, that would only work for an on-premise solution because you said you had to install it on the same machine as BC was installed. Would it be possible to kind of like take the same approach that you wrap the DLL and then it somehow becomes like an Azure function or something that then you could call and from the cloud as well? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think, I mean, in the beer manager, that was exactly what I did, and I think that's also what Michael did. They have an Azure function serving SaaS customers and an on-prem service for on-prem installations.
Okay, thank you.
I forgot to tell, so one of the reasons for having the on-prem service is that especially German customers don't want the data to leave the building. And also in some countries the internet is really bad, so you want to have the service running on your own machine and not in the cloud because that's not possible. So around here it's fantastic, but not in all parts of the world. And also privacy is a big part. You don't want the data to be out there because of a lot of reasons.
I also think if using the pattern I showed with the interface, you could also for individual, if you have multiple services, you can let the customer choose whether you will want the cloud one or an on-prem installation. I mean, both is possible. Okay, thank you for joining.